வணக்கம் நேயர்களே, மற்றும் நிகழ்ச்சியூடாக சந்திக்கிறோம். ஜூன் மாதம் என்பது இலங்கை தமிழ் மக்களுக்கு மட்டுமல்ல, பிரித்தானியாவில் வாழும் அனைத்து சமூகத்தினத்து மக்களுக்கும், ஏன் ஐரோப்பியாவில் வாழும் அனைத்து மக்களுக்குமே ஒரு முக்கியமான மாதமாக கருதப்படுகிறது. ஏனென்று கேட்டால், ஜூன் 13ஆம் தேதி தொடக்கம் ஜூலை மாதம் 1ஆம் தேதி வரை ஜெனீவாவில் ஐநாவினுடைய மனித உரிமைகள் பேரவையின் 32வது கூட்டத்தொடர் இடம்பெறுகிறது. அங்கு இலங்கை ஐநா தீர்மானம் குறித்த அதனது முன்னேற்றங்கள், அதனது ஏற்பாடுகள், இதுவரை எந்த அளவுக்கு அதனது ஐநா தீர்மானத்தை நிறைவேற்றி இருக்கிறது தொடர்பான ஒரு வாய்மூல அறிக்கையை ஐநா மனித உரிமை பேரவையில் சமர்ப்பிக்க இருக்கிறது. அதேபோல் பிரித்தானியாவில் ஐரோப்பிய ஒன்றியத்திலிருந்து பிரித்தானியா தொடர்ந்து இருக்க வேண்டுமா அல்லது விலகிக் கொள்ள வேண்டுமா என்பது குறித்த ஒரு கருத்து கணிப்பு வாக்கெடுப்பு ஜூன் மாதம் 23ஆம் தேதி இடம்பெற இருக்கிறது. ஆகவே இந்த இரண்டு நிகழ்வுகளுக்கு மத்தியிலும் நாம் இப்போது இந்த ஜூன் மாதத்தை சந்திக்க இருக்கிறோம். ஜூன் மாதம் சந்தித்து கொண்டிருக்கிறோம். ஆகவே இது தொடர்பான விடயங்களை ஆராய்வதற்காக ஆளும் பழையவாத கட்சியின் ஹெரோ ஈஸ்ட் பகுதிக்கான நாடாளுமன்ற உறுப்பினர் பாப் பிளாக்மேன் அவர்களை நாம் இன்று நிலைய களமளித்திருக்கிறோம். ஆகவே ஜெனீவாவில் இடம்பெறக்கூடிய இலங்கை தொடர்பான நிலைமைகளையும், பிரித்தானியாவில் ஐரோப்பிய ஒன்றியம் தொடர்பான நிலைகளையும் நாம் இன்று விரிவாக கலந்துரையாடலாம் எதிர்பார்த்திருக்கிறோம். Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you all.
You know, your party and the mayoral candidate got a heavy beating at the last mayoral elections. What does it mean for your party?
Well, actually, if you look at the election result, it was very similar to the general election result in London on the mayoral election. So, in many respects, it just meant that the parties stood still. If you look at the problems the party was experiencing at the time, the government were experiencing with a junior doctor dispute, the forthcoming European referendum, a whole series of different problems, clearly that was very difficult for our candidate to perform. He did extremely well, and I have to say, in my area, Brenton Harrow, we produced a 4.3% swing in our favour from the last mayoral election. So it's not all doom and gloom, far from it. We would have loved to have won, of course we would. But the reality was that it's always going to be a tough job to follow Boris Johnson.
But the issue is that, did it come as a surprise to your party? Because you had a centre and you had a Conservative mayor.
Well, we had a Conservative mayor. Boris Johnson is a unique individual. He's one of those larger-than-life personalities who was re-elected after having won the election in 2008 in reasonable favourable circumstances. So it's much more difficult then for someone to continue that process. Particularly, I mean, if you look at the electoral returns, in the European elections, the Labour Party got 50% of the vote in London. Well, they didn't go anywhere near that in the mayoral election. So I think from that perspective, we are London tends to be a left-leaning city right across London, and so the key is, can you turn out your votes in the areas that really matter to make the huge difference? And Boris, bear in mind, Boris only won by 62,000 votes, I think, across the whole of London. So it's only 2,000 votes a borough. So it was always going to be a challenge, and it was a great battle. I think in many ways, Zach had a very difficult set of circumstances to fight the election.
What are the main reasons for their defeat? I mean, you would have done a post-mortem.
Well, I think there are several reasons. One is the organisation on the ground wasn't as good as it could have been. I think that the European referendum has overshadowed the mayoral election in many respects. And indeed, right across there were concerns about the particular aspects of policy. I don't think that Zach Goldsmith's strengths of environmental protection and his soundness on finance, came across in the best way during the election campaign. And as a result of that, the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, was able to avoid proper scrutiny of his policies, which I think will be disastrous for London if he follows them through. But we'll have to see. You know, he's been elected. I wish Sadiq Khan every good luck in being Mayor. It's a wonderful job to do. And we'll hold him to account for the promises he's made to Londoners. And I suspect that people will be starting to say, well, hang on, wait a minute, you didn't tell us about what you're doing here, or you're not doing it. So there will be some worries for him as we go along.
But the final days of the campaign, you know, you had a very strong campaign, and there were some sinister campaigns as well. We could see in the newspapers that suggest, you know, Sadiq Khan, if he elected, won't stand up for the Hindus, he won't stand up for the Sikhs, which has a larger community, and, you know, also campaign from your party that, you know, the families, jewelries of the Tamils will not be, he will not allow them to have it. That kind of stuff. Do you still stand by those allegations?
Well, I think, you know, all sorts of allegations were made about the campaign and different people said different things. Unfortunately, I do think that the media played a part in this, in actually wanting to focus on those issues rather than focusing on the key issues that affect all Londoners. For example, there was a lot of concern about the decision that the Mayor has purportedly made to freeze fares for 4 years. Well, that as TfL is an organisation that only has its income from its fare income, that means that there'll be less investment on our transport infrastructure. So in similar terms, you look at the police, and no commitment was made on council tax, for example. The previous Mayor, Boris Johnson, froze or cut his share of council tax every year. He was Mayor for 8 years. Sadiq Khan as Mayor has made no commitment on that. And I suspect that you have to look at the record of the previous Labour Mayor, Ken Livingstone, who dramatically increased his share, doubled the council tax in London over his duration of office. And I suspect that's what we're going to be into for Londoners, and that's a big impact on people's pockets.
But the main issue was, at the centre of the campaign, was the housing in London.
Yeah.
Do you think the Conservative Party has handled it well?
Well, I think one of the problems is that housing in London is, the predominant problem is supply and lack of supply. We've been very successful in attracting people to come to this country for various different reasons from all over the world. And we've created more jobs in the UK than the whole of the rest of Europe put together over the last 6 years. As a direct result, people come here and obviously they want somewhere to live. But the supply has never actually matched the demand. I think that housing is the big issue, without doubt, across London. Now, in Parliament, just before the elections, I pushed through a bill for Transport for London to be able to go into partnership with developers to build housing on its land. We were opposed tooth and nail by Labour politicians. Now, it'll be interesting to see whether the new Mayor will use that opportunity to create these partnerships to create more homes for Londoners. We'll wait and see.
But, you know, Labour Party has its own problems.
Of course.
After the parliamentary election defeat, and they had a leadership problem. And, you know, we have a low-profile candidate when compared to the Conservative Party. He has won at last.
Mm-hmm.
Does it show that the Conservatives are losing popularity?
I don't think so.
Now that they have been elected second time.
No, I don't think so. I mean, bear in mind that in 2015 we got a majority Conservative government for the first time since an election in 1992. So from that perspective, we did extremely well and performed extremely well right across the country. In my own seat, we increased our vote and increased our majority and our share of the vote. So from that perspective, we perform well. We have to understand that clearly there are challenges, people are asking questions, and not enough, at the end of the day, in the election, not enough people voted for us. And we have to examine why that was and then decide what we're going to do for the future.
Another issue is that, you know, how it's like working with the mayor from an opposition party. As London is the biggest city, it's the economic hub, you know, a lot of capitalists come here and make investments and do a lot of trade. How it's like work with the mayor from an opposition party?
Well, it's like
the
many
government
other things.
in implementing its projects and, you know,
it's like many things. In the last Parliament, we had a coalition government between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, and that that worked reasonably well. I mean, a lot of people thought this wouldn't work. Clearly, if people are willing to cooperate, which I think is the right thing to do, to cooperate, then things can work. If there's a direct oppositionist view, then things will stop. What we have to do is to see where there's grounds for cooperation, to examine what the mayor can and cannot do. I mean, the mayor has powers, but they're limited in many respects. So the mayor needs the cooperation of central government to deliver. As I say, it's early days. We will have to see whether that can work or not. But a lot of it is dependent on the mayor. If the mayor chooses to take a complete opposition view to the government, then things will stop in London, and that can't be good for anyone.
But he, in his own right, he has his own way of implementing things. He has his own election pledges, isn't it?
Of course, he's won an election, and he's won on a basis of manifesto. But, as I've said, there are consequences from many of his policies. He's made a good start on reaching out to all the different communities of London, and I think everyone bears him goodwill. He has a honeymoon period, as all politicians do when they get elected. However, what you have to see is, how he delivers, and when the difficult times come.
Other important issue is that the EU referendum,
yes,
which is set to take place on the June 23rd.
Yes,
it's going to be a big day for UK and Europe. As a ruling party, what is your position in that regard?
Well, obviously,
do you want the UK to stay with Europe or to quit?
Well, I think as a party, we are neutral. The position is that we committed as a party to holding a referendum. The reality is that no one under the age of 60 has had a proper say over whether we should be members of this very expensive club or not. When we voted in 1975, we were voting to remain as part of a European economic community. And then there were 9 countries involved. There are now 28. No one has ever asked the British people, are you content with going into this very expensive club? And the reality is that the key issue on the 23rd of June is both sovereignty, in terms of whether we rule ourselves or whether we are ruled from Brussels, our control of our economy, our control of taxes, our control of the rules and regulations that exist in this country. And different people trade different things and pull out figures in terms of the volume of rules coming from Brussels. But the reality is there's a huge number of rules and regulations that come from Brussels every week that Britain just has to implement. We have no control over. So the key issue is, do we have sovereignty over how we set our rules and regulations? And then we are the 4th or 5th biggest economy in the world. We are sending every day £38.5 million net, so not gross figures, this is net figures, to Brussels of our money to be part of this club. And so the key issue, apart from the sovereignty issue, for the British people is to say, all right, this £38.5 million, which are the Treasury's figures, not mine, this is what the Treasury say, and the Treasury are all in favour of remaining. Is it worth us spending this money every single day, and wouldn't it be better for us to control that money and decide to do with it what we wish? I take the view that we are better off out of the European Union, that we should set our own rules in Westminster, and if the British people don't like the rules we've set, they can actually kick us out at a general election. At the moment, the current position in the EU is that the EU Commission, this unelected body, decides the rules. The European Parliament can pass them or reject them. They can't actually formulate them. So there's no actual democratic control over these rules. And then we have no choice but to implement them. Now that, to me, is ridiculous. We appoint the commissioners. The British government appoints the commissioners, as well as every other government. But once they're there, they are a rule unto themselves. They can just get on and decide what they're going to do, and there's no right of recall, even. So we have no democratic control over what goes on across Europe. And in many ways, people say, well, if you had democracy, this would get in the way of the project. And so what we should understand is this is a political project designed to create a United States of Europe with a president, with a government, with its own foreign policy, its own common defence policy, its a common system of taxation, a common currency, and everything being uniform right across Europe. Now, that might be a dream that some people subscribe to. I'm one of those say I'd rather we set our rules and then traded internationally, made sure that we're in a position whereby we can control our own destiny rather than being beholden to other people.
But you say your party position is neutral, but your Prime Minister, David Cameron, says that leaving European Union would be a self-destruction on the side of the economy. But and also you quoted some figures from the Treasury, whereas the Chancellor George Osborne warns of recession if you leave Europe. And this is what he said.
The shock to our economy after leaving Europe would tip the country into recession. This could be, for the first time in history, a recession brought on ourselves. As I stand here in B&Q, it would be a DIY recession. This government was elected just over a year ago to deliver security at every stage of life, to build a greater Britain out of a great recession. And after all the pain, all the sacrifice of the British people, why would we want to put it at risk again? It would be like surviving a fall and then running straight back to the cliff edge. It is the self-destruct option.
So stack all these things together. The fact we'd be heading towards a poorer Britain, the fact we'd be surrounded by uncertainty, the fact the financial system would be volatile, and it builds up to a profound economic shock if Britain leaves the EU. The central conclusions of today's Treasury analysis are clear. A vote to leave will push our economy into a recession. We'd have a year of negative growth. That's a recession. The pound would fall in value by between 12 and 15%. And that doesn't just mean it's more expensive when you have a holiday abroad. It means everything we import becomes more expensive, which increases inflation, and that hits family budgets.
What do you have to say about it?
Well, clearly, the Chancellor comes to this batch box in Parliament for the budget and then the autumn statement. And the autumn statement, he corrects the figures he's quoted in the March budget. And then the following budget, he corrects the figures he's quoted in the autumn statement. So you have to treat Treasury forecasts with a degree of scepticism to start with. I do agree that without doubt, when, as I hope, Britain votes to leave the European Union, there'll be a wobble, there'll be a shock, because we will obviously take time to negotiate what we're going to do for the future. We have to set up our trade deals, we have to set up the arrangements that all exist, and they can take a period of time. But I would think that we could very quickly negotiate new trade arrangements with the European Union. After all, they want to trade with us. We have a huge balance of payments deficit with the European Union. So they're sending more goods to us than we're sending to them. And that means that there's far more money flowing out. And that's irrespective of our membership and the cost of membership. So from that perspective, yes, there will be a degree of uncertainty. I totally reject the view suddenly that the currency is going to change dramatically by the sort of order we're talking about. Far from it. Because the pound is one of the
So you seek to differ, or you reject the ideas of the Prime Minister and the...
No, what I'm saying is you have to look at what the Treasury forecasts are and regard them with a degree of scepticism. Yes, the city markets, the financial institutions, they all like certainty. And of course, when you make a change, there's uncertainty. But every one of the economists points to the fact of once you get over that hiatus, the long-term future in terms of growth, in terms of control of the economy, will be far better. So, all right, yes, we will suffer for a period of time, short period of time, but after that, we are much stronger financially as a direct result of being in a position to set our own rules and regulations. We also have the issue of immigration. You can't avoid this because at the moment, anyone from the European Union who's a resident anywhere in any of the 28 countries can up sticks and say, I'm going to move to the UK, and we can't say no, we say welcome. The direct result of that is to control immigration, and we know that's led to figures of, just in the last year alone, of 1.5 million people choosing to come here and claim a national insurance number and then work here from the European Union. In order to control immigration, it means that everyone from the Commonwealth and the wider world has very strict visa requirements imposed on them. So, for example, many of your listeners and viewers who have relatives in Sri Lanka or other parts of the world, if they want their relatives to come here, we have draconian measures on visas to basically control some degree of immigration. Now, if we leave the European Union, we would then have a position whereby we want people to come here. We need people to come here and work, and we want people to come here and live. But we would set the rules. So everyone would have to apply to come here, whether they were from Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Italy, wherever. They would have to apply to come here in the same way as someone who wants to come here from Sri Lanka. But just imagine, at the moment, there are very draconian rules. So as many viewers will know, and I deal with these cases all the time, of visa applications. Well, we can actually control the visa applications and say, actually, we'd rather have people come here from Sri Lanka.
So your immigration policies are virtually brought down to a situation where the local politics decides the merit of the visa asylum applications than the human rights situation.
No, well, obviously the human rights situation where people are fleeing persecution, we would still and do have a very strong record in the UK of permitting people to come and live here because they are refugees, genuine refugees in fear of their lives. Particularly, of course, countries from the Commonwealth. So, for example, many Tamils decided to come here during the Civil War and in the aftermath of the Civil War. And of course, they made this their home, and that's part and parcel of the work that goes on, and so it should do. What I'm saying is that now that Sri Lanka is considered to be not a war-torn country, to apply to come here, the visa regulations are very severe because we have some way, shape or form to control the immigration into this country. And it's all about really effectively planning for what you do in terms of the future, because how do you plan for your health service, for your education service, for the various different social services, which are all provided to citizens of this country, quite rightly, when anyone can come from all over Europe and just make this their home, and we have no controls over the numbers of people coming. I'm an internationalist. I believe that we should be trading right across the world. We should shouldn't have artificial trade barriers for Sri Lanka and other countries of the Commonwealth, for example. We should be saying we welcome those goods to come in. But at the moment, there are huge, quite severe tariffs as a direct result of being members of this European Union club. But the reality is we have very strong links right across the world, whereas most of the other countries don't. And so therefore, different rules and regulations should apply. But that's not been negotiated.
Bob, we have a lot to discuss about on the Sri Lankan situation.
Yeah.
We'll do it just after the short commercial break. Please stay tuned.